one thing, it might have done a second thing. It made calls, and it sometimes received calls, right, depending on where the network was, you know. And I'm still having a, I put someone on Facebook yesterday saying, Vodafone's got 4G, when did it get 3G? But kind of, you know, we're at that stage now where the phones now, and the iPhone, the phone in my pocket, is probably more powerful than the computer that I'm using here. And it does so many other things in terms of even just, you know, the basic things like being able to take a photograph, being able to record something like a video, then being able to upload it to the internet and for people to view it all over the world. I can talk to the phone, it can talk back to me, it can tell me when I need to do something, it can give me reminders, it can tell me if I'm even driving down the wrong street and I need to take a different turn. So, and that's in about 15 to 20 years. You're not looking about here talking about the Ice Age or the Stone Age. We're talking about a very, very short space of time. And I think we need to embrace that because we're still left with this legacy. And Mike Coddenwall mentioned 2 or 3 times his dad or his granddad this morning or his great-granddad. And I think that there are still far too many learning environments, classrooms, that still resemble something like this. I mean, just look at the classroom we're in now. It's not too far removed from that there. And I think that also the thing that still is haunting us as well is that whenever you search for the word teacher in Google, you come up with an image similar to this, with a teacher stood at the front pointing at the board, and it's generally a blackboard or that kind of thing. And I think we really need to get past that, and we need to think more about really how can we be innovative and how can we create those opportunities for amazing world-class learning experiences. And the technology is there. We don't have to go out and buy thousands and thousands of pounds worth of shiny equipment because we've got the technology. The things that I want to talk today about the global classroom, about using Skype and stuff like that, you need a webcam and an internet connection. End of. We're not having to go out or knock on your IT development manager's door and ask for a huge budget to bring in all these extra things. All right? And I think that we need to embrace that, and even going off topic slightly, things like the BYOD kind of movement, bring your own device, and actually being able to be strong enough as a teacher, certainly in secondary, to be able to say, right, you can get your phones out and you can use your phones. Rather than having, oh, I need to go and book out the digital cameras. Why bother? Get your phones out, use it. But again, it comes back to your behaviour management. And then are you strong enough to be able to say, right, now we're going to put them away. All right? And I think that my big, not theory, it's not theory, my big kind of bugbear on this is that technology is not the problem. It's the users. And how many road traffic accidents do we have on the road every year? But I bet we've all driven here today. All right? If we were that scared about what might happen, we would never get behind the wheel of a car. You would never want to plane ever again. You would never do any of the things. You would never go to London after the terrace. All those things. It's the user that's the problem. It's our job as educators to actually educate people how to use it responsibly. I also think that it's such I think it's almost a crime. I was going to say a crime and shame, but it's probably a crime that I've got 2 children, an 11-year-old in year 6, who has also just gone through that kind of, we talked about this morning about the SATs, and he has had a SATs party, you know, and he is going on a residential next week, and all those type of things, and he'll come. The poor teachers at secondary that get in September, so I keep saying to him, before SATs, every day, he's like, what have you done today? Literacy, anything else? No. PE was cancelled, art was cancelled, music was cancelled, and it was just boom, 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 boom. Now I have this joke every day, I'm like, what have you done today? Have you done maths and literacy? No. What have you done? Yearbook, run some art, a little bit of music, and it's like, geez, he's going to get to September, and there's poor maths teachers, because he's done the level 6 paper, and we're kind of thinking he might, you know, on a good day, he might have got the level 6. And he's going to come in as this level 6 on the paper. He hasn't done maths for about 12 weeks, you know? But my kind of point is that, you know, so my 2 kids, is that they are able to, my boy, he loves kind of YouTube, and he's on Minecraft and all, he's got Xbox Live, etc. And I've tried to get him into creating rather than just consuming. So he's got his own YouTube channel, he's creating the videos, he's doing the walkthroughs, he's doing all that type of stuff that he's watching other people do. And I'm like, you need to learn those skills. Just consuming is not a skill anymore. It might have been technology, creating is not a skill. So I'm getting him doing that, and he can do that. He can create his own YouTube videos, he can do walkthroughs, he can put them up on his YouTube channel, he can do all that. And in Minecraft, him and my daughter, who's 7, they can actually create, design, build, construct whole villages, towns and cities in Minecraft. Her homework last week was to do something on the polar regions. So she made her own polar region and her own polar world in Minecraft, and then we did like a little walkthrough, 4 minutes, where I kind of asked her questions about it, and we sent that in as a homework. You know, I sent the link in. So we do all these things, and all these amazing things where students are and children are learning in a broader sense of how to do all these things. Yet far too many of us, as a profession, still get the kids into the classroom, put all that technology away, put them in your pockets, put them in your bags. I don't want to say it, get your pens and pencils out, we're going to do some real learning now. I think it's just such a shame that we still have that approach in far too many schools, far too many classrooms, because whether we like it or not, we are teaching our digital natives. Our kids know this is what they know, and I think we need to embrace it, and it's no longer good enough to say, oh, I don't do technology, or I don't do email, or I don't do this. Well, actually you've got to, because that's now part of your responsibilities, I believe, as a teacher in today's world. I was going to talk just there with my, quite possibly, that'll show about my favourite kind of educational speaker, which is Howell Roberts. I think I was in Howell's talk there, but Howell is just absolutely amazing. And Howell was talking about creating opportunities for awe and wonder. And that's something that I think we need to remember, that we don't kind of lose sight with educational targets and league tables about creating these opportunities, because these opportunities of awe and wonder are the opportunities for students to make real deep learning connections. And far further, far gone from this week or next week, how are they going to remember your content? How are they going to remember that lesson on a Wednesday morning in November when it comes around to exam time? Or how are they going to remember it, more importantly, in 10 years' time in their job when they need that skill? Because ultimately that's what we're doing this for, not really to pass a test. And we need to create those opportunities where, in Howell's talk, he was talking about how do we create pyramids and how do and it kind of constructed on the floor, and the kids had to think about what they were doing, and he really put them into that real life idea. And I was excited, sat there, wanting to be in his primary year 2 lesson about pyramids. And it's how do we do that? How do you make your subject, or elements of your subject, less boring than they are? And he talked about, and I'm going to coin this for the back of my school, he talked about, he set as a question with a challenge, how do you create botheredness with your kids? And that for me is the key to this, is that yes, we can use the technology, but we've got to make sure it actually creates some kind of botheredness and it enhances your subject. So by using what we're going to look at now is when I talk about Skype, I don't generally mean exclusively Skype. Skype is like a brand name, very similar to like Skype in the house. How do you actually do it? I don't expect you any more. I'm just going to go and dice in the living room. Alright? It just doesn't happen. You talk about hoovering. Well, I'm going to talk about Skyping, but I'm not going to say don't use Google Hangout and don't use FaceTime. But for me, people understand what that means by Skype. And I want to talk about how it can create a window to the world in your classroom. And for me that's really important, because I've taught a lot of you people who, for one reason or another, whether it's poverty of expectations or whether it's financial barriers or whatever it might be, unfortunately don't see the world for what it really is in its true beauty. And I think that we have a duty not only to deliver the content, not only to develop the skills in our students, but to show them and to give them an insight into the wider world that they might not see, so that actually when they do potentially have those opportunities, they can access them further down the line. And I want to start with a question, and this question I want you to think about in your mind throughout the next, what will be probably 20 minutes, half an hour, is what if? So I'm going to give you a lot of different scenarios now, and I want you to think about in your own context, whether it's primary, whether it's secondary, whether it's further or higher education, what if I could do this? What if I could bring an expert into my classroom via Skype from Australia? What if I could do this? All right? Because there's going to be so many opportunities, and I want you to be thinking and having some thoughts buzzing around your mind about, forget the barriers, because the barriers I will remove. The barriers of cost have gone. All right? If you want to bring David Beckham into your classroom, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. But you might just be able to get his foundation or David Beckham to Skype into your classroom. So what if you could bring David Beckham into your classroom? All right? So those barriers of time, cost, locality, all those things, just remove them all out of your mind and have that open mindset of, what if I could do this? First thing, how can we connect then? And I think being a connected teacher is massive. And how can you really connect with classes across the world? Or how can you bring other people in? And this is a picture of me. I ran with the Olympic torch in 2012. And this is a picture of me speaking live from my kitchen on an evening into a school in America about the Olympic torch. And I decided after I'd run with the torch that I wanted to really spread the Olympic message as far and wide as I could. about how it can create, or how it, the Olympic message of respect and excellence and all those type of things, and hard work. And I went around the brownies, the guides, the clubs, all those things in my local area. But I put a lesson up on the Skype in the Classroom website, saying it's called Bring the Olympic Torch into your classroom. And I put it up there and I thought, well, if a couple of classes want it over the world, then great. Since that time, and I had to literally take it off the website because it was kind of running my life at one point. I've done over 40 lessons in 17 different states in America. I'm trying to do the kind of the blockbusters of kind of. I need like about 2 more, and I've got 3 more potentially, and I'm kind of there. And a lot of those were done quite soon after the Olympics because there was still that buzz about the Olympics. But I've also spoken to schools in Australia, in New Zealand, Pakistan, and this week just gone, on Tuesday morning, I did one at 7 o'clock in the morning with a school in Seoul, in South Korea. That just came randomly out of the blue. I got an email via the Skype website saying that in 2018, the Winter Olympics are going to be over there. Kids are really excited, they're doing a project. It would be great if you could Skype into our class. So I was like, yeah, well, let's look at your time zone. And they were doing an after-school activity, so it worked all right. So I Skyped at 7 o'clock in the morning before I went to school. But you can connect very easily, right? And that call cost them nothing. It cost them 2 emails to me to get it sorted. And with Skype, and especially if you're using a HD webcam, which is a tenner penny now anyway, or lots of laptops have, it's so clear. It's not kind of all pixelated and grainy anymore. So when these kids, when I'm talking about this torch and I'm saying what it was like to run with it, what it was like to be picked, what it was like to receive the email when I've been nominated, what it was like to, etc., etc. And then I start talking about the torch and I show them the torch, they can see it, and they can see it in real detail. So I can turn it around and say, this is why it's got 3 sides, this is why it's got 8,000 holes, this is, what, and then I start asking them questions. Why do you think it's gold? Why do you think it's, etc., etc. And I can see the kids, and the kids are kind of, and the teachers just sat at the back doing nothing. And the kids are like this, and I go, right, the kid in the blue jumper on the 3rd row, the kids are and they're shouting these questions out, and it's like I'm just in the room. Absolutely amazing. So I've seen it from an education point of view, which I'll talk about in a minute, from my kids having somebody Skype at them, but I've seen it from the other side. And I've said this to a few people, and they kind of laugh and go, oh, yeah. And I'm like, no, really. I've done Skypes where I've literally been ironing 3 or 4 minutes before I've spoken, and about 30 seconds after I've spoken. Because it's not like it needs a lot of setup. Your laptop's there, it's on, you're on Skype, and it rings. And you hope that you're wearing what you need to be wearing, and you sat there, and the kids not running in the kitchen and all this kind of stuff. But you can do it anywhere. That's the point, you can do it anywhere. And if I was going to let's go back to David Beckham again, if we were going to get David Beckham to come into our classroom, how much money would it cost? He'd have to have a whole day out of his schedule. It's just not going to happen. Whereas I can open the laptop and do a 20-minute talk, and it probably takes me 21 minutes out of my day. Shut the laptop, done. So when you're thinking about, well, who might I be able to get into my classroom? Who might I be able to Skype in? It's not a huge effort out of their day to be able to do this. Okay? And when we talk about experts in a minute, certainly from an English point of view, I know that the Skype in the Classroom website has got, because Microsoft owns Skype, they've got a huge pull with speakers and different organisations. And there's hundreds of organisations that want to speak to your students because clearly they're going to get something back from it. Imagine an author, right? Imagine if you have kids, right, as a parent, and your kids come home and say, oh, you won't believe what we did there. We spoke to this author about this new book. It was absolutely amazing. They told us about this, 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 and this, and why they made these characters, and what this alternative ending might have been. What's the next thing they're going to ask you on Saturday morning? Can we go and read the book? So you can see how actually they have, these speakers get something back. Huge organisations around the world need to speak and need to work with education from a PR point of view, from a funding point of view, and also from a kind of social good point of view, that they need to put something back, or they need to be seen to be putting something back into education. So lots of different opportunities to do that. So the first thing that I want to look at 3 different areas of how you can use Skype, or the larger kind of thing or activity we associate with Skype. The first one is to collaborate with another class. And I think that there are so many different ways. I want you to get your kind of creative juices flowing here. How could you, in your subject, collaborate with another class? And also, why would you want to do that? Why might you want to collaborate with another class? What would be the benefit of it? I'm going to say anything more than that. I just want you to take 30 or 40 seconds to either think to yourself, or if you're sat with someone, turn around and just have a little chat about, introduce yourself, what subject do you teach, why might you want to collaborate with another class like this, and I'm not going to say anything else. and then if you can share some ideas back in about a minute's time, okay? So have a think, chat, turn around.
Saying peer critique is one thing, but we're also saying like public display of work. It could be between the same subject, where they're just, you know, somebody's written a poem. And
perfect. Right, let me take those two separately. So peer critique. So we might potentially, let's just take these two classes here because they're in front of us here. So this class here might be actually displaying some work that actually this class is going to critique, or they may have even sent it over beforehand via email, and they could have been looking at it and then be able to send some back. And then that whole idea of the public display of work, I suppose, links to that, doesn't it? Because because of in a public display of work, there's a link, and I think that's great. They can critique it. Fantastic. Anybody else? Anything different? Yes.
Well, we just set pen pals up with our year 7s. I teach languages, and so I just want them. They've been writing to each other. I want them now to start talking to each other.
Who had a pen pal when they were younger? Who had a pen pal? How excited were you about that?
totally.
Well, did you ever speak to them or meet them or anything? Wouldn't it be amazing for that to happen? And I know it kind of goes against the whole kind of literacy and, you know, writing and all that stuff, but surely we can do that as well. Surely there's a way we can do that.
Communication literacy.
Yeah, exactly. Like say, you know, just that whole idea of the communication. And I mean, these two classes here actually are in different continents, because I've seen the kind of video for this. So it might, you could do it where you actually Skype just across the town. You might even Skype just across the hall in your school, but you might be Skyping across the other side of the world.
Debating competitions, inter-school debating competitions, or even between countries.
Absolutely. I mean, if you could get a debate going, and you were almost, you know, and like I say, Harold talks about kind of making things real. If you say, like, you're representing Great Britain in this debate, this global debate about whatever, you know, and you're giving those the kids a real platform for that. And that's fantastic. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Oregon's got a rough web. We split sites, we're a mile apart, so at the time year 1 and year 5 were really similar topic ideas, so the year 5s were being experts, the year 1s they've got questions, collaborating within school, like saying across the whole platform.
Absolutely, absolutely, and then I think that there's a lot of, well, I'll tell you what, you were going to say something as well, weren't you?
Yeah, just for feeder schools like primary and secondary, and the primary, the year 6s could Skype the secondary school, and they can have a look around. They could ask their questions and their worries, and it would make them feel a whole lot better about coming up.
Absolutely, and I think that they're all amazing ideas, and lots of which I hadn't even thought of before I kind of planned the session, and I speak a lot about this. I think there's a lot of hidden skills as well. You know, we've talked about how they would critique each other, we've talked about how they would you know, speak to each other and talk about different areas and topics and be experts on, but all the hidden skills of communication skills. Well, if you're going to present something, there needs to be a clarity about it. You know, you need to be able to stand, you know, in front of, you know, even just be able to stand in front of a camera and physically speak and have the confidence to speak and relay your ideas. And I think that one thing that I'm also very kind of big on, and this comes with using Skype, but also using lots of other technologies, having a real audience. And I first came across this with a Twitter account at the head's office that does the 100-word challenge. And it's all about getting students to be able to write for an audience. And the whole idea behind it, and it comes also from the work of Ron Berger in Ethic of Excellence, is that if you give someone a real audience, there's a lot more motivation. And what they mean by that is, as a teacher, the students, so if you're my class, and I ask you to hand something in, you would all assume that I'm an expert on that. So what's your motivation for telling me what the right answer is? Because you already know that I know what the answer is. So what is there much motivation in that? Flip it round, and if we're talking about, let's say, this class here needed to learn about, I don't know, the railways. Okay, so I come from Darlington. In 1825, that stopped the railway, first railway. So that class might didn't know about railways. This class might think, well, railways are just nothing, they're all over in England, there's nothing really interesting about it. These guys could be the experts. And then I've been told, you have to plan something, because these kids here in Australia really need to know about railways for their exam. And you've got to get it right. Don't get it wrong, because if you get it wrong, they'll get it wrong in their exam. The motivation for actually doing something is suddenly a lot better. So having that real audience, I think, is key, and something like this could do it, because you could be getting kids to learn something in order to teach it to another part of the world. And as we know as teachers, especially if you are teaching outside of your subject area, when you have to teach it, you've got to know it. You know, because you're going to be fielding those questions of what if or why not, and you think, you've really got to know it. So I think that's really important. Right, So the second then thing is, how can you bring an expert into your classroom? And I touched on this earlier about saying that the Skype in the Classroom website has lots of different expert organisations that work with them. They've even got things like the NASA, the digital NASA, the NASA Science Organisation, and lots of different amazing organisations that work with Skype. So how can you bring an expert into your class? Now, I've got a video I'll show you in a second. But in terms of my experience, I've brought in 2 or 3 experts into my classroom over the last 3 or 4 years. The first one I brought in was an ex-Premiership footballer who my wife went to university with his wife. So I know Graham quite well. And Graham Murphy was the captain of Reading when Reading won the Premier League. So Graham has, with him being a fullback, he's marked Ronaldo, he's marked Giggs, he's marked Rooney, he's all those things. Now I can stand in front of my GCP class and say, pressure in sport is, and I can reel off all these things. And I can say, oh, when you get to higher, to semi-finals and finals, there's pressures more. And when you're playing in front of a lot of people, obviously, and people can crack under pressure and some people don't. And the kids are going, yeah. But when Graham comes into my classroom via Skype and says, when I played at Old Trafford in front of 75,000 people, I was absolutely, bricking it in the tunnel. And it was because, and we are trained to get our heart rate down to 56 beats per minute within 10 seconds. And when I, etc., when I played for Scotland, and I'm like, the kids are just fixed, totally and utterly fixed. And I'm kind of like a spare part, thinking I'm just so useless now that I can't do anything like that. And it was almost like an A-level or a degree-level lesson that he gave them on pressure in sport. And to that day, I'm sure, this day, those kids will remember the lessons that that he was talking about. Very recently, I brought in, via an off chance, Judy Murray, so Andy Murray's mum, Skyped into our girls' PE lesson at Acklam about 6 months ago. And we went down the line. It was a random kind of meeting, I suppose. I was talking to my head of PE about using Skype and wanting to really get it going in the school. The next day, she was speaking to her friend who was the English ladies tennis captain, who was saying, oh, Judy Murray just walked past me. And everyone went, ask her if she'll Skype us, will you? And she literally, and it was like that. And she went, yeah, okay, tomorrow morning. So Emma came running and said, oh, Judy Murray's going to Skype in tomorrow morning. I was like, wow, we were both just like, wow. And I went, right, okay, stop. And she went, what? I said, which kids? And she went, I don't know. I said, when's she doing it? She went, tomorrow morning. She could only do it at 9:30. I was like, okay, so who do you want to do it with? I'd like to do it with this class. We looked at the timetable, they had maths, obviously, that, and it was like, So, right, have you booked a room? No. Have you got any equipment? No. I was like, what? So we had to very, very quickly, kind of, like, we need a classroom very quickly, we need to make sure the webcam was there, we need to grab the kids out of maths and tell them it was some really important reason and all this kind of stuff. But Judy really Skyped in, and she talked about, we got a lot of girls, we talked about women in sport and the different opportunities and this kind of stuff. But we then started talking about, which I didn't really want to initially. I didn't want to go, let's just talk about Andy, because we wanted to speak to Judy about herself and her role as a tennis coach and this kind of stuff. But eventually, obviously, we wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of, well, what's Andy really like? Is he as boring? And we were trying to kind of, and we were, but she was saying, so we then said to him, well, how does he prepare? And she was saying that actually, the last couple of years, he's walked on the centre court, or used to anyway, walk on the centre court with one earpiece in, the other one out, so he could get the kind of the atmosphere from centre court. But he used to always have Eye the Tiger on his kind of, well, I was going to say a Walkman there. That shows on his MP3 player. But those little things again, I can't tell kids that, I don't know that. But again, that will stick with them, even just from a motivational point of view and arousal and that kind of stuff, of how we get ourselves ready for sport and how we get ready for battle. So there's those fantastic things where you can bring those experts in. Lots of different opportunities, and I think again it's just thinking, well, who could you bring in? Now, after the Olympics, and I tried this, and I was very, very close. I was sure that on the GCSE exam at some point was going to be a question on the Olympic legacy after London 2012. I was pretty sure it was a no-brainer that at some point that would come up. So I thought to myself, again, that whole idea of, well, what if? Who is the best person in the world to speak to my kids about the Olympic legacy? So in that time it had to be Seb Coe. So I was like, right, let's do it. So I emailed and I sent a few emails off, and I used the kind of, I've been Olympic torchbearer and all this kind of stuff. And it got through, and it got all the way, and it got to his office, and his PA phoned me, and his PA was and said, look, he'd love to do it, he's read this, he's read your blog, he's seen the photographs, he'd love to speak to your kids, but just right now, the next few weeks, he's just manic with everything that's going on. And it didn't happen. But I suppose the moral of that is, well, it got to the office. It didn't just get rebuffed by someone, you know, in the call centre, whatever it was. It got there. And I think the other thing is, what I've learned about it is, get kids to ask as well. You know, pull on the heartstrings a little bit, you know, and because not many people like to disappoint, you know, 6-year-olds or 12-year-olds, whatever it is, you know, use the kids as your kind of, well, we'd love you to speak to us about this, and you know, who knows, you never know. So that's great. I want to show you a video now. It's only a minute or so long, a couple minutes long, just about how you can potentially bring an expert into your class. And I just want you to think right now about, put yourself back in your shoes, one of two places. Your classroom where you were taught, or one of the classes you were taught as a child, or your classroom where you teach. And put yourself in the shoes of the students who come in every day and potentially hear your voice or the same voices done in the same kind of way, etc., etc. Just think about this and think about what if this would have happened to you as a student, or what would if it happens to your students right now.
I think that all children benefit from Skype in the classroom. Traditional teaching suits a certain kind of children who can read or children who can access things by looking at pictures, but there's lots of children in school who struggle with that, and they like a more kind of kinesthetic, hands-on approach.
My name is Rivka. I'm from Sandkop. We are a Seabird Rehabilitation Center, and we just want to tell you we are super excited for our call next week, and so are some of my friends. Hi guys!
On the other end of the Skype call now, we've got Rivka, who is in South Africa, and she works for Sandkop. And this afternoon she's going to tell us all about the plight of the African penguin.
Sandkop is an important place in the conservation world as we take care of seabirds. Two of them are critically endangered, the African penguin and the Cape cormorant. The environment in the ocean is actually not in a good state.
Why are African penguins in danger?
The dangers that all seabirds face is pollution, oil, overfishing, climate change.
I've never seen the class that quiet and that kind of switched on and listening really intently to what was being said.
What will help the penguin population to grow?
Either recycling, making sure you take care of your litter responsibly. Being a responsible citizen will help our seabirds.
You can take children anywhere with Skype because you can take them to experts in any manner of things, and Skype in the classroom is growing all the time. Every time you go on, there's new experts and new courses kind of popping up that you want to be involved with.
This is something you wouldn't see in a textbook.
Yeah, I think it's difficult for children to imagine what's going on in the world, and Skype is real stories told by real people who really know their stuff, and they can really empower the children, they can explain what's going on in a far better way than perhaps the teachers can.
So thank you all the way from South Africa, and I hope you have a good rest of the day, boys and girls.
It was really exciting compared to a normal lesson that we have. I would love to do it again.
Bye.
Right, and again, that didn't cost that school anything. I mean, just and I saw some of your faces as you look at that kind of, and you had that awe and wonder kind of look about you of like, wouldn't that be just awesome? You know, and you imagine if you were doing something on penguins. Now my son still loves penguins as an 11-year-old, and he'd be quite cool about anything involving penguins. But it's, you know, a lot of those subjects, they can be kind of a little bit dry. You bring it to life like that, and you think about, I imagine now, if I'd been in that lesson as a 7 or 8 or 10, 11-year-old, I'd remember that for years and years and years, you know, and that's the key to it. And lastly, the third area that I want to look at is then, how can we get kids to explore, and how can I talked about before about the window to the world, and the fact that, unfortunately, for whatever reason, or a number of different reasons, some of our students don't get to see the true beauty of the world as it is. But also linked to that, we all know now, or if you don't know, you will find out pretty soon, what it's like to write a risk assessment for a trip, and the amount of red tape now that's involved, as well as the finance, as well as the cover implications, as well as everything else, you just feel like you're running through another wall, and you hit another wall, and you hit another wall, and actually you think, it's just not worth taking the kids out. And that's such a sad state of affairs that we then kind of get to that impression sometimes it's just not worth it, because the experience is worth it, but it's all the legwork it takes. And that's just for a trip to the other side of your town. You imagine saying to your head teacher, I'd like to take a trip to the top of Everest, or I'd like to take a trip to to New York, or I'd like to take a trip to the top of a glacier or an ice field, which I'll show you in a minute. And the look of horror on them initially of like, really? Are you going to risk assess this? But there are opportunities, and I joked about the kind of 3G and 4G network earlier, but that is growing, and there are more networks available, and there are opportunities of how you can network, which I'll show you in a second as well, to take your class to the far reaches of the world from the comfort of their classroom. And I suppose what I want to show you is what I would love is kids almost running to your classroom thinking, well, where are we going to go today? What are we going to do today? Who's going to speak to us today? And those amazing opportunities to create those lifelong kind of learning memories where it's not just that image we saw before of you at the board, in the rows, and kind of think, well, we need to be past that now, we're a lot better than that. So I've got a couple of videos, and then I want to have a bit of discussion before we finish. And again, put yourself in the position, if you're learning now, let's say you're learning about global warming and climate change, if you're a geography teacher, I don't know how you do that or whatever, but that might be again something where, it doesn't really inspire kids, right kids, today we're going to do climate change. It's like, okay, right, well, let's have a look how we might do it differently.
Hi kids. So lesson number 1, why are glaciers important? Think about this, ice stores over 70% of the world's fresh water. All the rivers, all the lakes, all the waters except the oceans, are only 1.4% of the world's fresh water. The bulk of the water that people depend upon is stored in snow and ice. So let's look at this here. This majestic waterfall is coming from the glacier that we'll be visiting.
And again, very, very easy to bring that person in, that person there works for an organisation called Vox Natura, and Vox Natura are an organisation who are looking at climate change, and again, trying to really educate the youth of today about how important it is that we actually look after those natural resources. It's bringing it to life. And the last one I want to show you, which I think it kind of blew my mind when I saw this, is when you think of places you can't take kids to, and then you think of places where you can't have a lesson because of certain environmental factors, this has to be up there with literally the far reaches of the world.
None of them have been diving before, none of them have any sense of a world beneath the ocean.
I use technology in the classroom so that I can reach beyond the walls. We look for those moments where the kids have their eyes wide open and you get those big smiles on their face when something finally clicks.
It's really been a unique opportunity for my students to experience something other than Serbia.
Today we are gonna have a chat with Fabian Cousteau, who is at the bottom of the sea in the one and only underwater lab called Aquarius. He's gonna be on Skype with us live, so you'll get a chance to talk to him.
Fantastic. Welcome to the bottom of the sea in the world's only undersea marine laboratory, Aquarius. We're 63 feet down from the surface. We're 9 miles offshore of the Florida Keys in the Atlantic. Aquarius is unique because it's the world's only undersea marine laboratory left in the world. We're basically basing Mission 31 off of something my grandfather did 50 years ago for the first time on a Cousteau expedition.
Right, just hold it there because we're running out of time. It just gives you that idea of kind of how things can happen and what you can do, and really kind of taking your, that whole idea of what if. What if we could go to the bottom of the ocean and teach our kids from there? And I think before these things haven't been possible. Get onto the Skype in the Classroom website, because there are a lot of things on there you can register for, and you can say, I want to take part in that lesson. I don't suppose any of you have a contact of someone who can teach you from the bottom of the ocean, but there are people out there who you can get hold of. Right? But it's also, well, do you know, if you're an English teacher, do you know a journalist? If you're a science teacher, do you know a doctor or a nurse, or etc., etc.? It's think, well, if they can't come into school for the whole day, can they Skype in from their desk? How can we actually do that? And the last question I want to leave you with is, well, why not? What if and why not? Because the why nots are disappearing. The technology we've got now, we're able to actually eradicate those barriers. We're able to use the technology for free in our classrooms. And all the things you saw there just required an internet connection, a whiteboard if you want to. You don't even need a whiteboard, you can beam it onto your wall, you can have a laptop, webcam, speakers, done. I'm sure all of you have got that facility. And I know from my point of view how excited the kids are, how much they've really learned from it, how much they can take from it, and I think it then gets you into those memorable learning experiences, those moments of awe and wonder, and like how Robert said, creating that botheredness in your classroom. And if you then start to, over the next few days, or even on the way home at night, you might start, you've listened to lots of things today, you'll start kind of, breaking it down and constructing some ideas, and it might just be that in a week or so time, something comes to you and you go, I bet we could Skype in, or I know someone who could do this, or I'm going to go and try and find the best person to do this, to really bring my classroom to life and to create a window to the world in your classroom. So thank you very much indeed for listening. Hope you've taken something from it. If you want to get hold of me, you can do, feel free on any of that. But a lot of those resources, those videos are on YouTube. Type Skype in the Classroom on YouTube. You can find those on there. If you want to go back to your school and actually sit with some of the teachers, listen, I want to show you this and I want to get your juices flowing and create juices flowing, then we'll go from that. So thank you.